Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Lustig. Hopefully some slides. There we go. I'm Michael Lustig. I'm an impact investor, both through VC funds that have an impact focus and through direct investments in companies that have an impact. I'm also a bit of an impact evangelist, if I can use that word here, teaching about impact investing in a variety of forums on an academic level and in other places. And I'm going to take us through a few things, which is why I'm up here before I sit next to Yaron. I'm hoping that most people are generally familiar with the concept of impact investing because we've been talking about it all day. But I just wanted to keep a very brief review to make sure we're all on the same page. So impact investing really involves an enterprise that intentionally includes a social or environmental good as part of its core mission. And generally, you see three primary characteristics for an impact investment. It's an investment, not a donation. So even though we're talking here about leveraging philanthropy, we're talking about investments. As such, we're expecting a positive expected return. The impact that's being achieved is both intentional. It's intentional, not accidental. It's something that we're aiming to get done. And it's an impact that is both measured and measurable. So there's a spectrum of philanthropy and investing with pure philanthropy at one end and pure profit at the other end. And on the philanthropy side, we have venture philanthropy and program-related investments. And away from pure profit, we have socially responsible investments, which aim to do no harm, and ESG and SDG investing, which proactively invest in ways that do good in the world, usually addressing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So impact investing is generally viewed as encompassing the middle part of the spectrum. There we go. Sorry. Today we're really going to focus on catalytic capital, which is a form of venture philanthropy, something that can take many different forms, and we'll briefly explore some of them. So just to give a few examples, as part of the previous panel, we heard from Sagi Balasha, CEO of Ogen, Israel's first social bank. And Ogen really funds itself through a variety of catalytic capital. It uses impact loans and has just started to use an innovative structured financing structure. So basically, that's a variety of ways to fund itself. But from a catalytic capital standpoint, impact loans and first loss cushion philanthropy. Hamerchava Chevrati, the social space, uses impact loans that fund renovation costs that are then used to repurpose old real estate for use by NGOs in a very synergistic way. And just last example, Keren Mahalach, which actually does not exist anymore. They just shut down. But they worked with NGOs to generate mission-aligned revenue, and over 50 million shekel of new revenue has been generated as a result of their programs. So just different examples of using catalytic capital. So does this type of stuff sound familiar? These previous examples really were funded by philanthropy in different ways. The key commonality is that the capital that's being deployed has a degree of leverage. And a relatively small investment is being used to make a very large impact. And this kind of does remind us a bit when you say a small thing having a big impact. It reminds us of the state of Israel. So a small Mideast country does have an outsized impact on the world, conceived here 125 years ago. And with catalytic capital, we're ultimately demonstrating impact that's demonstrable, reducing the reliance on continuous donations, and ultimately creating a more efficient form of philanthropy, essentially evergreen philanthropy. So referring back to what Michael Eisenberg mentioned this morning, this is a form of mutual upscaling. And we're lucky to have with us today Yaron Neudorfer, the CEO of Social Finance Israel. They've issued multiple social impact bonds, which is really an innovative pay-for-success structure. And it's another form of catalytic capital. And I'm just going to briefly go through what they are, and then we're going to go into some detail as to what's getting done. So a social impact bond is something that connects parties that are interested in achieving social good, often branches of the government or large philanthropies, with service providers and impact investors that ultimately are serving the people in need. And the investors' funds in a social impact bond are used to pay for the program that is getting done. And there's a guarantor that's providing those investors a positive return if and when the program is proven successful, hitting milestones that are predetermined. Sir Ronald Cohen is the originator of this innovative structure, and it's been used, frankly, all around the world. Initially in the UK, many times, as we'll see, in Israel, but it's been used in over 100 different instances around the world to solve different things, solve social problems. I'm actually going to
over
turn
250 in 32 countries.
How much? What is it? 150?
Over 250 social impact in 32
okay.
countries.
So I'm old data on that. I'm actually going to get into conversation with Yaron in a second to discuss some of his amazing success in this area. And here we go. This is just what Social Finance Israel has done so far.
So thanks, Michael. It's really great to be here because I think, Ronnie, you told me this morning what a genius thought it is to connect Herzl with impact, to connect Zionism with impact. And Herzl, as many people said before me, was the first Zionist entrepreneur all about Zionism and continuation. So regarding social and career impact bond that we at Social Finance create and execute, it's really a mean to change the way public entities work, because it's not really about, not only about the money. Governments usually do not need the funds that we are able to retrieve from investors, at least to recruit from investors, at least not in Israel. But it's all about the way they work, because we, if you ask me where do we go, where do we want to be in a couple of years, we want the public service or the government to think about results, to aim to outcomes and results, and not just, think about the process. Because today, when the government wants to do something, they issue a tender. Once you win the tender, that's it. That's where it stops. You need to do what you offered in the tender. And then, in a country like Israel, where technology is very dominant, things are changing very fast. You're stuck with the tender that you did 4, 5, 3 years ago, and that's where you are. But if you focus on outcomes or if you focus on results, then you work tirelessly all the time in order to achieve those results. So you're not tied to a specific way. If you see a technology that's coming, you adopt it. If you see something that doesn't work, you cut it out. And you focus on outcomes. Now, when the public service or when the government will focus on outcomes, we can save so much waste of taxpayers' money that goes to process, that goes to bureaucracy, instead of focusing on social and environmental outcomes. So this is what we do at SFI, Social Finance Israel, together with our sister organizations in the UK and US, in the Netherlands, and Ruben, the CEO of the Social Finance Netherlands, is somewhere in the dark there. You can see here a bunch of social and career impact bonds that we executed in the last couple of years. But in order to tie it to the title of this presentation, we're talking about catalytic capital, where you can use philanthropic money in order to leverage impact investment and do much bigger projects. So for example, if you take the project that we do in Rahat, enhancing the studies of youth, high school kids to study 5 units or the highest level of math in Israel, we started with a 300,000 shekels grant to develop the project. And the project, we can click, or you can give it to me and I'll click. And the project has started with 15 million shekels that we raised from investors, from 7 investors, half of which are Israelis, half of which are foreigners, to work with 3 cohorts of 10th, 11th, and 12th grade to enhance their math studies. And you understand it's not about education, it's not about math, it's a strategic goal for the State of Israel to have the Bedouin community integrated into society and find their way into a higher education and quality jobs like any other part of society. And now, after one cohort, the government has realized that this is a very, very successful project because we are able in the first cohort to increase the number of high school students that study 5 points math by 50%, which is dramatic. So the government has decided to budget it with additional 70 million shekels. So we have a 90 million shekel project that started with 300,000 shekels, philanthropic money, to do the research on how to do it. So in the first years of social finance, I heard time and again that maybe impact investment is going to replace philanthropy and what do we do? And you know, philanthropists were pretty hesitant to jump in. But you see, it doesn't replace it. It's complementing it. Actually, we can do much more with using philanthropy in order to get the government on board and to get impact investors on board. And at the end, to get regular investors on board as well. So this is the tie between philanthropy and impact investment, as I see it. We can take another. Can we do another example? Or?
Yeah. So I actually want to take a point. Just addressing a point that that you had just brought up. So first of all, just it's an amazing model because you're essentially taking the techniques and skills of an entrepreneur and applying them towards a social problem very directly. And that the leverage that you mentioned is just incredible, especially in that last example. But you touched a little bit on investors, and I want to know who are the investors specifically in social impact bonds?
So the investors in our case in Israel are a couple of kinds. First of all, it's high net worth individuals, funds, philanthropic funds, and Michael, you mentioned earlier that in philanthropy you give out the money once, and then there it goes. Now, if you use philanthropic money in a social impact bond where you get it back tied to the results, then you have evergreen philanthropy. You can use it time and again. And like in Alice in Wonderland, you know, the bath that is self-filling, it's the same. It's even growing. So you have more money. This is another type, financial institutions. And in our case in Israel, we are the first one in the world to offer social impact bond to the public, where we did in our elderly isolation social impact bond, so the public as well.
And I guess from an institutional investor's perspective, it's something that's not correlated with other assets. So it's, in other words, it's an investment such as it is that doesn't correlate with other investments. So if you're looking for diversification, it gives you that element as well. What do you see for essentially the future of social impact bonds?
So the future of social impact bonds, as I see it, is twofold. First one, I see more and more appetite, at least in Israel, both with investors and with the institutions, to do more pay-for-success projects, because at the end of the day, a social impact bond is a pay-for-success project. And we see the next generation of social impact bond in sustainable linked bonds, which are huge and growing even faster these days in the world. We're talking about a market of $1.5 trillion already. Teva, for example, the Israeli pharmaceutical company, floated an SLB, Sustainable Linked Bonds, where in the size of $5 billion, where they tie their supply of medications for underserved populations, specifically in Africa, to their interest rate that they pay on the bond. So, for example, if they do not hit the targets of accessibility in Africa to what Teva offers in terms of medication, then they pay more interest to investors. So that's the next generation, I would say, of social impact bond, and this is growing dramatically. We're talking about 1.5 trillion, as I said, and growing. Last words, because we're minus 33 seconds now. It counts minus as well. You see here the link between philanthropy and investment. You see that in 8 years, because this was last year prepared, in 8 years of social finance Israel, we used 23 million shekels of grant money to influence the Israeli GDP by 2.2 billion shekels. And this is very tightly calculated. So 23 million grant capital generated 55 or 56 million in investment money that will be paid back by government according to the level of success, up to the level of 85 million, and will save money to the government in a larger level of 100 million shekels and influence GDP by 2.2 billion. So you see what catalytic capital can really do. Use a small amount of money to generate big impact. Thanks.
Yeah.